Hey everybody, it's Joe from Gadgetry Tech, and in today's video we're going to talk about the new R5 Max HD from Rig. This is one of several new models they've launched recently, and I reviewed the Pro HS a while back. So if you want to learn more about a more affordable one, that one was closer to 60 to 70 bucks, and I'll have a link in the description for that. So this guy is $150 US, and it's a wired headset, which I know isn't going to please everybody, but I am going to cover what makes this headset kind of unique in this price range, how it compares against others in this price, such as the Drop PC38X, as well as why you would consider a wired headset in this case over wireless, if you even care for that. So before I get any further, this was sent to me for review by Rig. Won't affect what I say about it. I just want to disclose where it came from. I'm not paid in any way to make this video. I don't do kickbacks. And at the time of releasing the video, I won't do affiliate links later. I'll eventually add a generic Amazon affiliate link if I find one for it, because that helps me purchase things that were not sent to me for review. But I just want you to know where this came from. Again, it won't affect what I say. So let's cover what's included, because the accessories of this is kind of unique. For one, you have this USB-C DAC, which doesn't look like much. It's rather unassuming because it's so compact, and I like that it's USB-C because that's kind of where everything's going nowadays. But the termination is going to be quite different. So it's not just a DAC that has a headphone output, and they didn't split the analog connection. This is a shared ground for the microphone, which we'll get into crosstalk after. But this uses a 3.5 TRRS connection, which will cover your mic and your headset, a USB-C input because this has 18 watt USB-C power pass-through. So if you're using this on a phone or a mobile device and you want to be able to charge it simultaneously, it's 18 watt pass-through. I wish they supported 40 plus, to be honest, just because if you're ever using this for a handheld that uses like a Z1 or a Z2, for example, chip, having a little bit more power would have been nice, but you can just use the adjacent port for that. So it does not do data pass-through, so it's not like it's a USB hub that passes through there. Now, the other connection is a 3.5 millimeter input. It's an auxiliary input, allowing you to connect the monitor output of a desktop microphone or an external media device. Let's say you're plugging this into your PlayStation and you want to connect something else into the mix so you can hear two things at once. You can do that with this. Now, all of the volume adjustment is handled on the cable itself, and there are two cables that it comes with. One is the traditional 3.5 millimeter TRRS. This is what you need if you want to use the microphone, and naturally it's connected to the mic. So you might notice that there's another cable here. This isn't anything crazy. It's a rubber mic, and you have a volume slider. Now, I asked about the durability of this. It's tested for, I forgot if it was like several thousand or 5,000 cycles. One thing I want to point out, there's the catch right here. So to max it out, you want to push it in a little bit and click it into place. This locks it at max volume so you don't accidentally adjust it, because if you're controlling volume on the Windows side or your game console, you don't want two separate volumes, otherwise you might not get the volume you're expecting. So pay close attention to that. Now, if you don't want to use the microphone, this little guy just magnetically pops off. There are 4 pins here and the microphone system, and it is super easy to get on and off. We'll talk about the microphone and the mute function and all that stuff later, but if you don't want to use the mic and you want to use this as a traditional headphone, they give you another cable in the box that snaps in just like that, and then it even comes with a 1/4 inch adapter, 3.5 to 6.3 millimeter, so you can plug it into basically any amplifier. No balance cables in the box, but that's not common with any gaming headset regardless of price. Now, the other thing I want to point out is the cups, which just the same way with the Pro HS I covered in the past, I love seeing it exposed. I just think the labeling is kind of cool, but you can actually customize it. So it comes with pretty traditional magnetically attached cups, and it says Rig on it. Nothing too fancy, but it kind of completes the look and it makes it look more of what you'd expect. When it's off, it kind of, is more like the Sony 7506 design, in my opinion. Now, they have different designs, which let me flip this around so it's the correct way, so you can customize it further. There are going to be some licensed custom designs with other esports teams. Who knows what else they'll partner with, which will add some splashes of color. You don't have to buy these. They vary in price, I assume, but at least it's a customizable option. I think what's really cool is because you can just buy the plain ones that are less expensive, you can always just custom paint these. So you can 3D print them. They have an STL file if you want to, embed the magnets and everything. However, these are inexpensive enough where if you just buy the replacement caps, I like painting. I don't mind doing a custom coat of paint, which has been very tempting. And now that I have enough kits, I'm probably going to do that. So that'll be a fun customizable project. Now I want to get into the headset. in terms of build quality and comfort and all of that. Again, $150. You want good build quality if it's wired, because there's not a lot of features, obviously, to this particular headset. We'll get into the other stuff. This slider here is metal. It's very, very durable and premium. This fork is plastic. It is a thick plastic, and this seems like a seamless gap. It's like a single mold on the actual yoke itself. So I don't believe this represents any significant chance of breaking, but obviously anytime there's plastic, anything can happen. You have a traditional metal screw to attach the cup, and then it's a telescoping yoke. This is a plastic outer on the headband, and then you have a leatherette inner liner. Now, my personal preference, especially at $150, I would have preferred this to be sport fabric. I think it'll hold up better over time. So that's probably my biggest criticism of the chassis, is switching or staying with a leatherette. It's not going to affect the sound quality or anything like that, and it's still rather comfortable to wear, but sport fabric is a little bit more breathable, and I think it just holds up better over time, because these can effectively dry out a little bit. So the cups, or the pads themselves, dimensions are quite large, 65 millimeters by 42 and a 24 millimeter depth. And it's a symmetrical depth, so you're not gonna have any issues with like your ears kissing the baffle. 24 is quite deep. And what's really cool, because I kind of popped this out earlier when I was taking the back off, is the pads are magnetically attached, which exposes the 40 millimeter graphene driver. This is an Aura driver. It's over 95% pure graphene on the driver, and this is the big selling point of this particular headset. And we'll get into the sound quality and what graphene does for that later, but the big kicker, or I guess the selling point behind the marketing and why you would consider graphene drivers, they typically have higher power handling, so if you tend to push louder volumes and you expect a lot of bass to go with that, the graphene drivers just traditionally are good for that. Doesn't guarantee it's gonna sound a certain way, but power handling and driver consistently from unit to unit is quite good. Now, they're also very sensitive and easy to drive. 119 decibel sensitivity rating on this particular model with a 32 ohm impedance. So even if you don't use the DAC, it gets very loud and it's very easy to drive. And the reason why I say that is because this DAC is good. It sounds fantastic, super, super clean, no noise. This is great if you have a laptop that doesn't have the best headphone output, or a desktop where the onboard audio tends to be kind of noisy. I wish the power was a little bit greater. I would have, been happy with a slightly larger DAC if it had more overhead. I only say that because even though it gets loud enough at full volume, I typically don't want to have to hit full volume to get the audio I want based off certain things I listen to. And if I plug this into my MacBook, for example, the headphone out on my Mac gets several decibels louder than the DAC. So your mileage is going to vary. The PlayStation controller is more than powerful enough to drive this, so you will get very loud volumes whether you use the standard headphone cable or you're using the microphone as well. As far as the rest of the comfort goes, this weighs about 336 grams on my scale. It's on the heavier side for an all plastic analog headset, but part of that is because it's using premium materials, and these pads aren't the lightest pads in the world because it has some magnets. So they are relatively light pads, but when you compare it to something that's like literally just pure sport fabric and they're thin, it just adds up. I think the biggest part of the weight is coming from the metal yokes themselves, or like the sliders. Clamp force is moderate. It's pretty consistent as well. So when I put it on my head, the squeeze is enough to be secure, and because of the weight of this headset, it's not going to move. Passive noise isolation is excellent as well. So if you're concerned with playing in a louder environment, that's another thing that part of this design is built for, is the esports arena. So if you're not going into the super expensive stuff from Ace Zone, and we've seen a couple other esport brands out there that are marketed towards the higher end, this is a much more mainstream version of a high-end esports headset, but you still get really good passive noise isolation. The clamp force is about 6 newtons, and that puts it on par with something like the Razer Black Shark V3 lineup, and slightly lighter than the biodynamic headphones, for example. So I don't find the clamp force to be an issue at all, and it helps a lot because the pads are extremely comfortable. You have a sport fabric outer, which again, I prefer sport fabric. This is going to be very durable, and it's going to breathe and not break down. It has a leatherette liner, and you can see some vents here, which are designed for tuning purposes of the bass, and it has a leatherette outer. This is part of where you're getting the noise isolation from. So to me, this is a really good pad, considering it's a closed back and they want to lock in some of that sound.
And on the note of sound, this is what my voice sounds like using an analog connection directly to my MacBook, and this is bypassing the included DAC, so I'll switch to that in a moment. The microphone is very sensitive. My gain is only set to 50%. It's not a warm, smooth sounding mic. There is some compression there, and again, this was by design. I asked about this. They try to do some kind of analog noise gating. So the idea is if you're in a louder environment, you want something that kind of focuses just on what's in the front of the microphone. It reduces background noise without needing as much software to do so. However, if you use software to reduce background noise, this is giving it a lot more to work with, getting better performance for your team or wherever you're using this. So at home, obviously, you might not have the loudest environment, so you might want a more open sounding mic. I just wanted you to know where I guess this design came from and what its intent was. Now I switched over to the DAC that's included with the headset, and because the DAC, I mentioned the higher sample rate and bit depth before, the 384 kilohertz 32-bit depth, which is insane. You actually have a pretty high setting on the microphone side, so you can max this out at 24-bit 192 kilohertz. It's a little overkill for a mic that's voiced like this, but at least you're not adding or reducing the quality further on the settings side of your host operating system, for example. So you still have a little bit of that pinched nasally effect, but again, it's a very smooth sounding DAC, and you can always apply EQ. So if you know how to do parametric EQ on the voice, this is what my voice sounds like after doing some EQ. It's the exact same microphone, however, I'm shaping it to better fit how my voice sounds, and then I benefit from the background noise isolation and all that good stuff.
One other cool feature of the DAC is plugging it into a Windows 11 device will activate Dolby Atmos. You don't have to pay for it. The license is built into the DAC. If you plug in with analog directly to Windows, it's not going to activate Windows because it just sees it as an analog headset. So if you are wondering why Dolby Atmos isn't working, make sure that this is plugged in and you're sending sound through that. So now when we get into sound quality, there are a few aspects to consider. One is the objective sound quality, which is the measured side and takes my opinion out of it. And then it's what we hear and what we experience, and also what we like and dislike. The measurements are just part of the equation. It's not the only part of the equation. So I want to talk about new measurements. So I have a new website that I'm launching or launched earlier this week called headphonedatabase.com. and IEMdatabase.com. It's going to be this huge site full of tons of data, and I'm keeping it all free forever because I don't believe in gatekeeping content. So we have a new measurement rig. The Care 5128 is the most accurate and most expensive headphone measurement rig in the world, and it's going to allow me to capture very consistent data from all the headsets and headphones I've reviewed in the past and everything going forward. This acquisition was made possible by a sponsorship with Wicked Cushions. So they actually contributed a huge chunk of money towards the 5128 to help make sure we were able to attain it. And in exchange, I'll be including more measurements of their pads and providing really good data. So I just want to give a shout out to them. Again, thank you to Wicked Cushions for supporting and helping make this rig a possibility. Now, getting into the frequency response of this particular headset, it has a very unique tuning. This is going to lead into several other discussion points when we get into the subjective side and the game side. But when we look at the 5128 measurement to the diffuse field target, which is more of, I guess, what you would consider a more neutral speaker-like presentation of something that's flat, there's a lot of audio science behind all of this. So these targets will change over time. And I'm also adding game targets in the future for different games that you might play and want to customize the sound for. However, this does track pretty well. So the 1 to 2 kilohertz area boost or emphasis does color the sound. This is going to make vocals stand out and become more forward. It can add a touch of like nasalness or shout to it. It's not too extreme, but this is geared more towards gaming, not reference audio. And I want to show you something really cool. So I measured this on the older Gross KB006X Pinaclone. You can see similar frequency response in certain areas. The Gross rig that was significantly less is quite accurate in the voice region and even in the bass region for this particular headset. There's a bit of a difference in the mid-range and obviously in how treble is represented. But the reason why I pulled this measurement up isn't to confuse you on the differences of rig to rig and how we hear things differently. But if I show you the R5 Sphere Pro HS I reviewed last year, it has more bass, flatter mid-range, and you can see it's actually more adherent to a more neutral target, even in the high treble. So I'm just going to flat out say it. If you're just listening to music and you want a microphone occasionally, the less expensive R5 Sphere Pro HS can actually sound better in a lot of cases. I think the tuning of it is a little bit more natural sounding, and frankly, I enjoy listening to music on it. especially for the price. It's an absurdly good value. So if you're just buying this headset for music, I would actually consider saving some money unless you want to deal with EQ, because one of the advantages is the hidden stuff of having higher power handling on the Max HD and less distortion. So if you're okay with EQ, you can always change it, but out of the box, the less expensive one to me had worked better. Now, this changes a bit when you switch into the gaming side, where certain emphasis in different frequencies can actually change how the game sounds and what your experiences are. So we're going to stop with the frequency response stuff, and I want to talk about my gaming experience, because I actually think there's some unique things here. And part of that has to do with the spatial audio side of things. So I tried it with and without Dolby Atmos, and generally I had a pretty similar experience in terms of imaging. There are some games like Arc Raiders where when you enable spatial audio, it just sounds a little bit more vast. It's kind of wacky how it does it. There's some unique phasing that happens when you get into spatial audio. It's basically different frequencies get in and out of phase slightly, and there's time delay that creates a more virtual soundscape. It makes things sound wider. And the R5 Max, that's where it excels. If you want something that kind of breaks the confines of a traditional closed-back headset and sounds more wide, that's what this kind of does as a special trick. Now, it's consistently good. Like when, and I'm just going to get right to it. So when you play FPS games and you compare it to the less expensive R5 Pro HS, this is a more performant headset. It's very easy to pick up positional cues. It's more consistent, and it emphasizes those positional cues, so they just are easier to pick up. Bass performance is exceptional on both. This has a little bit tighter, deeper bass, but they're both excellent. I think one of the biggest differences you'll hear, and this is a pro and a con, the less expensive one has more high treble, which is what we call the air region. So it might make wind and rain sound more sparkly, and if anything, it could sound more immersive. So I wouldn't fully rule it out. This is a smoother high treble, and as a result, if you are focused more on the esports side of things or just more competitive FPS play, the tuning of this particular headset is going to lend itself better, because not only do you have the positional cues excelling on this model, but you don't have as much of the fatigue or extra energy and other frequencies competing with the audio cues you care about. That's part of what you pay for on a tuning like this, in addition to the lower distortion, the better sound isolation, etc. So it's really not to say that this is a better headset across the board. It is exceptional in some key areas, and it is noticeably better than some of the more expensive wireless headsets I've used when it comes to FPS. And this is kind of a harder topic for me, because I've come to the conclusion in a lot of cases, like I can be, just to be blunt with you, I'm super competitive with a $50 cheap headset. You can't rely exclusively on a headset to make you a better player. It's nice that the headset won't hold you down. You don't want distortion. You don't want discomfort. You don't want to have such a bad sound quality that it's like really hard to hear over the mud of things. So I was kind of leaning in the direction in general lately, like, use the headset you have to your advantage and play smart. Don't just assume you're going to hear everything and then blame the game if you didn't hear something, right? But when I was doing a lot of A/B testing, this kind of emphasis does naturally pull out the audio cues I care about, so I don't have to try as hard to hear those things, and that is a selling point. It's not going to compete with a high-end audiophile product, but I do want to point out the whole thing of closed back versus open back, because the Drop PC38X is very close in price to this, and that is a legendary headset. The Drop PC38X is a lighter headset. It has more clamp force. I've complained about that in the past, putting a little extra pressure on my ear. It sounds more natural for music. I think voices sound incredible on the PC38X, and even then, it's not the most neutral headset, but for a gaming headset, it's fantastic with that. There's two huge differences with the Drop PC38X compared to this. One is, of course, noise isolation. So as good as the PC38X is, if you have a noisier environment, if your PC is making some fan noise, you have an HVAC system, someone's vacuuming, whatever, as good as that is, if you're competing with a much higher noise floor, you're fighting other audio that you don't need to fight. And it makes you less competitive because you can't hear it as well. Then you turn it up, you can damage your hearing, or you introduce something else called distortion. And the Drop PC38X does not have the same power handling as the R5 Max HD with the Graphene drivers. So now if you also like to push higher volumes with a decent amount of bass, you want more immersive, explosive bass, The R5 Max HD is going to be better for that. So this kind of just summarizes where the perfect one headset at any price range does not exist. Stop looking for the perfect one or determining that one just beats everything else, because what beats everything else to you is certainly not going to be the same for someone else. So if you want an open headset, if you want it to sound natural and airy and you prefer the music side of things, on the closed back, less expensive side, the Pro HS exists. On the open back mid-range, the Drop PC38X is a fantastic pick. This has some unique qualities, particularly in more competitive games where imaging performance matters a lot. And then you have the benefit of more bass immersion with less distortion and the passive noise isolation to block out background noise. So at the sacrifice of a slightly worse microphone. You know, the PC38X has a better sounding mic. So there are a lot of things to weigh here, but I can tell you I have a huge selection of gaming headsets here. I've kept everything I've reviewed, which is why I'm really excited to finally get this Brulin Care 5128 rig. I'm going to be measuring all of this stuff that's come out in the last 3 to 5 years and adding it to the site. I compare it against many others. I've compared this to the HyperX Clouds, the SteelSeries products, Turtle Beach, because they have wired headphones and headsets at a few price points similar or less than this. And this is consistently one of the best wired gaming headsets you can get for FPS, especially at this price. It is not the one I would pick to listen to music or suggest for every single style of listening across the board. So you just kind of have to weigh pros and cons. But I'm really excited what they're doing with the new lineup. It's just a matter of if you're okay with some of the shortcomings, like the leatherette headliner. You know, I guess if this is an issue for you, if you don't like this, the pins seem durable. The only thing I'll point out is if you press on the mic, you can kick this up. And if you do that, that can break the connection. But in terms of the traditional movement for flip to mute, it worked fine. So this isn't going to be for everybody. They do have a wireless one that just came out called the R8 that I'll be reviewing. So maybe you want some of the benefits that this is giving you, like the graphene drivers, and you don't mind paying more for wireless. As soon as you introduce a wire, you're changing your bandwidth, because instead of copper, now you have to deal with wireless compression, latency differences, etc. And that's why a lot of the pros use wired. It's not only more reliable, but think of it as like a data pipe, and this just flows more data, so it tends to hear less or hear more because there's less compression. So that is my rant on the R5 Max HD. I hope you learned something new about this headset and why it's kind of an exciting launch to me, because this space hasn't kind of been really improved upon much in the last few years. Like, we haven't seen any generational changes on closed backs. VZR Model 1 is on the higher end side for positional audio, but the Drop PC38X, EPOS, and this are all like kind of your cream of the crop for the wired side. So it'll be interesting to see how the R8 performs, and we'll cover that in a future review. But I hope you found this helpful. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I'd love to see you at some future content. Stay safe, and I'll see you next time. Bye.